the mind-body connection. So we know that they're working together. So let's separate it out a little bit now and talk about the theory of the mind. Can you give us a breakdown on that?
Yes. Theory of mind is how I got started in the field of clinical hypnotherapy. It was introduced by my mentor's mentor, Dr. John Kappas at the Santa Monica University, and he called it Tom. Meet Tom. So when people come into my office, they meet Tom, Theory of Mind, T-O-M.
Oh, it was a person.
Theory of Mind.
I like that. Very personable. Go ahead. So tell
Yeah.
us about Tom.
Let's talk about Tom, the theory of mind. And so when you talk about the mind, what is the mind? I come from India. Mind is called mana. Mana means mind, but it's not our head. It's not our brain, okay? Your mind is what we classify over here now as our heart mind. And nowadays, there is something called a field of cardioneurology, which they have said that the heart has more nerve endings than the brain. It's true. And so our mind has these aspects. When a child is born, a child is really born free. Okay, if we don't get spiritual and just stick with psychology, the child is born like a blank slate. All the child wants to do is survive. And in order to survive, what it really needs is a primitive mind, okay? And a primitive mind is regulated by a few senses, like flight, fright, and freeze. And fight is what we get into, like when I'm fighting for survival. I'm surviving. So the primitive man had these instincts of fight, flight, and freeze. Like if you're in the wilderness and there is a grizzly in front of you, don't try to shoot with your camera at that moment, you know. If you are, you know, the advice given is when you're in the wilderness and you meet a carnivorous creature, freeze, because most of them, they want a kill. They don't want dead meat. So if you freeze, you pretend to be dead, they will just leave you and go away. So if you can imagine in olden days, the caveman walking with his cave lady in the wilderness, and there was a woolly mammoth or a saber-toothed tiger, what did he do? If he was close by, okay, and he had some weapons like stones and sticks or a bow and an arrow, he threw all of that, okay? So he put up a fight and maybe he won, okay? But if he was far away, he did not bother going close by and fighting. Flight, he ran. But if he was close by and no weapons, he froze, okay? So human beings go through this even today. Like whenever it gets hard for us in life, what do? First, we start fighting. And some people are like, no, I don't want to fight. They wear the running shoes. They're like me. They wear the running shoes and they fly. They're out of the door before trouble arose. Or else we freeze. And freeze is modern day procrastination, where we pretend the dishes will get done. We pretend the bed will get made. We pretend the taxes will get paid, you know? Although the moment you file your taxes, you should be able to get your returns in 2 weeks. You know, by January 31st, we all get our W-2 or 1099s. And do we really file our taxes by the second week of February? Most people don't. We wait till April 15th or April 18th, or we file a 6-month extension and go to October 15th. Why? Because procrastination, we freeze, okay? And that is what we do. So that's the primitive mind. And when we are in that state of primitive existence, we are surviving. We are just going through the motions and doing whatever it takes to not die or not get into trouble. That's primitive mind. Now, between the ages of 0 to 8, what happens is we learn, our subconscious mind is formed slowly but surely. So we learn that there are things we like and there are things we don't like. For example, again, going back to the classic example of spinach, maybe you like spinach, maybe you don't like spinach, you know. There's chocolate, maybe you like chocolate, maybe you don't like chocolate, or maybe you don't care about chocolate. So our subconscious mind has memories, but each memory is a memory only because there's an emotion attached to it. There's a charge behind it, something that makes it either pleasurable or painful. Things you don't care about, you don't remember. They are not part of your reality. So that is what the subconscious mind does. And for example, like maybe when you were little, and this is why we gain weight, is when you were little, you know, you learned to walk and you fell, or you bumped your knee somewhere, you scraped your elbow, and you were crying, you were in pain, right? And so someone, your mom or an older brother or sister, somebody lifted you, brought you home, washed you, and you were still hurting, and then they gave you a chocolate chip cookie. And then you ate that and you felt so good. And you knew that walking isn't so bad because, or falling isn't so bad, because if you get hurt, you will be held, you will be cared, you will be loved, and you will get something very comforting. So that's why later on in life, let's say Halloween season, Thanksgiving season, everybody's bringing treats into the work. Okay, right now it's a bad example because it's 2020, nobody goes to work, but essential services, yes, those people go to work. And everybody brings in on a Friday or a Monday or something, you know, a case of donuts or whatever it is. And you are like, no, I have made the promise that this season I'm not going to eat any sugar. Okay. And then there was lunchtime, and then there's 2 o'clock. You want to stretch, you want to take a break. You go to the bathroom, you're coming back, and the box of donuts are still sitting over there. And you're like, maybe I'll take a quarter of a piece. You take a knife and you cut it and you put it in your mouth. And suddenly you're no longer the sensible 45-year-old. You're back to being the 4-year-old who tasted the donut and felt so good. And that's how subconscious mind works, because we always go back, we regress to that place of comfort that we knew, that was familiar with us. And then between the ages of 7 to 9, what is formed is called a critical mind. And a critical mind is your inner critic. It's like an older sister who tells you, remember last time, Johnny, what happened? Remember how you got into trouble? And you look up and you say, yep, I remember, it was trouble. I'm not going to do that again. So the critical mind keeps us safe, because there's a saying, better safe than be sorry. So we are safe, we play safe. So we don't get into trouble, but we don't have too much fun. And that is why all these addictions happen in our life. And then the next part is the conscious mind. And the conscious mind has logic, it has reasoning abilities, it has analytical faculties, it has decision-making abilities, and the willpower, which we don't seem to find when we need it the most. That is our conscious mind. And that is why all that you need to succeed, to be healthy, to have love, to have finances, to be spiritual, you have the information out there. There are books, CDs, tapes. You can tell how old I am. Tapes, I'm talking of tapes. You know, YouTube videos, podcasts, all the information is here for you. But your conscious mind gets it. And when you try to change it, you can't, because it's not part of your subconscious programming. Things you did not watch while growing up, things that you were not aware of when you were growing up, it's not part of your reality. And your subconscious mind is 88% of who you are, and your conscious mind is only 10%, 10 to 12% of who you are. So guess who's winning? The subconscious. The subconscious is winning. So if you want to change your reality, you have to change your belief system. You have to reprogram yourself. And in order to reprogram your subconscious, first you have to unlearn and then relearn. And that is where a hypnotherapist comes in, who helps you with that. So you can, for example, I'll give you one example is when you were younger, you were told stranger danger before you were 8. Don't talk to strangers because it's dangerous. You don't know what they will do. So when you grow up in life and you are a self-employed person like me, like you, Kimberly Ann, and now we have to talk to strangers and tell them, hey, I'm in business. And they're like, oh, stranger danger. I can't talk to strangers. I don't know what they will say if I tell them about me. So we can't. So one of the reframe would be a stranger is a friend waiting to happen, you know? And the moment you think of a stranger as a friend waiting to happen, you're like, oh, let me go and say hello to them. I mean, what's the worst thing that'll happen? They won't say hello to us. So anyway, they were not my friends and they are still not my friends. But what if they also reach out their hands? And nowadays we won't reach out, we will just bow and say hello. And they also say hello to us. See, now you got the conversation going. So this is how the reprogramming of the subconscious mind happens, and when it is effectively done. So when you change so in our subconscious mind, we have this associations, which I call the knowns. This is what you know, this positive thing you know, this negative thing you know. So, and this is what creates your script. And when you change the script, you change your life.
Excellent. So how do people become aware of what their scripts are?
Just by looking at the reality and being conscious of it, and no blame, shame, and guilt, but taking responsibility. Your finances will tell the fact of what is your relationship with money. How much love you experience and share will tell you what is your relationship with love. Your health, you know, your eating habits will tell you your relationship with food. So be objective about it. And you don't have to go vegan, you don't have to go vegetarian, but you know, if you can eat healthily and don't let your eye, because there's a saying in India, you know, your eye is hungrier than your stomach.
Yes, yes.
Your eye thinks like, oh, I can eat all of that, and then you start putting it in your stomach. And if you think about it, you know, if you can put both your fists together, just do this, Kimberly Ann, with me. That is the size of your stomach. Two closed fists, when you put them, that's the size. That's actually the size of your stomach. Do we eat this much? No, we eat a huge plate of food. And really, if you think about it, half of your stomach should be water and air, and the other half should be solid. Because once the food goes in, the stomach needs to churn. They need to churn and break down the food, you know, the things that you did not chew completely in your mouth. Because that's what stomach does. Stomach does not digest the food. Digestion happens in the mouth, digestive juices. And then there's the villi, the small intestine, that does the absorption and the assimilation. And then the large intestine does the elimination. So stomach is just breaking down the food. But if your stomach is this much and you ate this much food, what are you doing? I don't even want to answer that question.
Oh, no, you do, because, you know, it's the same thing. There's a saying, my eyes are bigger than my stomach, which really, obviously, the eyes aren't bigger than the stomach. But I think what it really is my subconscious is bigger than my stomach. That's really what the bottom line is. The subconscious is bigger than the stomach. So the subconscious has all these memories of things that have been rewarding and things that have been fun to eat or tasted great. So then when the eyes see them, the stomach's like, hey, bring it, let's go, bring it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's the subconscious that says, bring it, bring it. The stomach says, no, don't do this to me. Don't do this to me anymore. Please, please, please. What are you doing to me? That's what the stomach is actually saying, like, stop dumping.
Yeah. Well, the stomach says, don't eat so fast because I can't give you a signal to stop because you got too much coming too quickly before I can get you the signal up there to slow it down.
Yeah. So that's what, you know, is.
That's what Tom's about. What else?
That's what Tom's about. Now let me tell you something else. So why is my reality so? So I have a story because I had promised that I will give you a story, right? In every conversation. So here's a story. Did you watch the movie, The Titanic?
I did.
I did. Good, good. And I don't.
See?
Yeah, there you go.
She stands on the front of the boat.
Yeah. But that didn't really happen on the Titanic. That happened in the movie. But if you watch the Titanic, what happens in the Titanic? What's the real story? The ship sinks, right?
Yes, it does.
Yes. So why did the ship sink?
Greed.
There were two aspects.
Greed and poor planning.
There was the spiritual aspect, why it sank, and there was a material aspect, because spiritual aspect was, and I have been to Belfast and I have been to the place where they built the Titanic. And there were actually 3 ships, and Titanic was the smallest of the 3 ships.
Really?
There were 2 more that were its sister ships. And Titanic was this man's pride and ego that they would have this unsinkable ship.
Mm-hmm.
So when man said, I am building an unsinkable ship, someone up there said, we will see how unsinkable that is. And on its maiden voyage, the ship sank. Humans' ego matched, had to deal with spirit. The second thing was at the material plane. How did it sink? There was an iceberg, right?
Yes.
There was an iceberg. Now, when you think of an iceberg, when you look at an iceberg, and even if you have not seen an iceberg, but when you hear the word iceberg, and if you speak English, you might have heard of the phrase or the term, the tip of the iceberg. Have you?
Yes.
So what is the tip of the iceberg? It's not the tippy top. It's really the part of the iceberg that floats above the water. And that is 10%. That volume is actually between 10 and 12%. And 88 to 90% of the iceberg is floating under the water. That is like our mind. The 10%, 10 to 12% above our conscious mind, the tip of the iceberg, and what's below the water, below the surface, submerged, is our subconscious, which is 88 to 90% below the surface. Now, again, let's go back to Titanic. So which part of the iceberg sank the Titanic?
The part that they couldn't see coming.
The part that they couldn't see coming, the part that was below the surface, that cut through the hull, And that is
the subconscious.
The subconscious. There you go.
Way more dangerous.
Way more dangerous and way more powerful. There you go.
Way more powerful.
Yeah.
In either direction. In either direction.
Either direction. There you go. Yeah. So if you think of an iceberg, forget Titanic for a second and just look at an iceberg. And you know that an iceberg floats. So what makes an iceberg float? Is it the breeze above the surface of the ocean, or is it the water currents below the surface?
What's below?
What's below? So yeah, that's your subconscious. When people say, I need to quit smoking, I know I can do this, but I can't. Why can't you? Because somewhere along the way, the joint or that cigarette became your friend, and you do not know how to live without your friend. Because every time you smoke, you inhale, you in fact regress back to the time when you were suckling on your mama's breast. That's how far back you go. And that was comforting. And that is why
it was an oral. Mm-hmm.
Yep.
An oral fixation.
Yep. It goes back to that primitive state.
Mm-hmm.
If I could be anywhere, I'd be here with you, sharing our healing hearts, our hope and our truth. Joy overflows here at the crossroads. Here at the crossroads. Oh, here at the crossroads.